Welcome back to the Jackie Kaminski Experience, where we break down the biggest myths, mistakes, and strategies in sports nutrition so you can actually perform at your best. And today we're talking about something that especially fighters, potentially other weight class sports are far too familiar with, and that's weight rebounds. And today we're going to talk about the truth behind them. So if we're talking about weight cycling and weight rebounds, let's talk about this in fighters specifically first. So there's quite a few studies now that have come out talking about what weight rebound looks like in fighters. So when we look at fighters specifically, right, the magnitude of rapid weight loss, combat sport athletes are most commonly losing 5% or more of their body weight in the 7 days prior to weigh-ins. Okay, and so we know that if we look at that, that's not really coming from body fat, right? That's mostly coming from body water losses. So when we talk about putting that back per se, again, those rapid weight changes, if we're taking all the water out of the body, and if we're doing that by carb depletion, sodium depletion, water restriction, right? Because the muscles are what hold all of that fluid. So that's when you hear these crazy changes in weight from 1 week to another. When you hear massive drops, weight drops in these combat sports, the majority of it is likely body water towards the end. So that what that means is that when we see that rapid weight gain post-weight cut, a lot of that is fluids replaced back in the body. And there's a study here by some professors over at Nova University and a lot of professors here in ISSN that I'll include here in the corner. So we see that when we compare fight night weigh-in to their actual weigh-in weight, the percentage of weight gain typically averages close to 10%. However, many of these studies are just looking at body mass as a whole. We're not looking at specific body composition changes. When we're looking at these studies specifically, again, we talked about all of that body mass is probably most likely coming from fluid. So the weight that we're putting back on is that fluid restoration. We're putting carbs back in the body, sodium, water. So that's where that weight increase comes from. However, these studies aren't looking at more long-term implications. So the biggest thing for you guys, obviously 10%, close to 10% of your body weight put back on is crazy, but also if you're depleting a lot, it makes sense. But what about the implications after the fight? Because a lot of fighters, a lot of weight class sport athletes complain about this yo-yo dieting where their weight significantly increases after a fight. And especially if they don't have many back-to-back fights, that weight can still creep up pretty high. So by the time they enter the next camp, it's harder for them to lose weight. So today we're talking about the implications of that weight cycling, because especially when we're looking at studies like this, like the rapid weight gain after these fights, we're not really following fighters after the fact. And a lot of these studies are really just looking at body mass as a whole. We're not looking at those body composition changes. So when we go back to talking about weight cycling and talking about weight class sports or any sport where weight cycling is really common. And what I mean by weight cycling is where you have rapid changes of body composition in short period of time frames. So that means you're losing a lot of body weight and then you're either gaining it back, or the time frame, you're just going back and forth. The whole term of yo-yoing, right? Lose a lot of weight and then it comes back on and then you lose a lot of weight again. And it's this cyclical cycle that occurs throughout your career, whatever it might be, or maybe you're just a regular individual. But there's definitely some significant effects on the body. And that's what we're going to dive deeper in today, because weight cutting and weight cycling is definitely not good for you. And for those of you who wonder, especially as you get older in your career, damn, I can't drop weight the same way, or these weight cuts are getting harder, or why was this cut so much harder than the last one? Well, we're going to get into that in a second. So let's talk about the metabolic damage of extreme cutting. So this is when you're dropping massive amounts of weight in a short time frame. What's actually going on in the body? So let's first assess kind of what's happening hormonally, right? So we have a couple main hormones at play that are going to affect all of this. We have leptin and ghrelin, which are our hunger hormones. So leptin is what helps keep you full. Ghrelin is what makes you hungry. We have cortisol. Cortisol is a driver of, it's one of those epinephrines. It's what gives you energy, but it's also significantly catabolic. We have our thyroid hormones, which is going to be responsible for our metabolism. And if we look at this chart right here in the corner, I'm going to put it over here, we can see key hormonal metabolic adaptations that occur with dieting. So, or when you have significant caloric restrictions, you're going to have significant reductions in T3 and T4. So that's what's responsible for your thyroid, which is in turn responsible for your metabolism. So when you restrict food, it's signaling the body to downregulate. When we talk about overtraining and again, a reduced caloric intake, we're increasing our rates of cortisol. So cortisol is going to cause more metabolic stress, which again, I mentioned this hormone is extremely catabolic, which is going to promote more muscle loss and fat retention. Your body kind of goes into the state of holding on to all your body fat because that's your energy reservoir. That's what is going to help keep you alive. So that cortisol hormone is changing what's going on right there. Leptin is going to drop significantly. So that's reducing your satiety. So the hormones that help make you full is going to decrease. The hormone ghrelin, which makes you hungry, is going to be increased. So together they're driving a stronger appetite. And then finally, like I just mentioned, resting metabolic rate, which is your metabolism, is also going to decrease. And we saw that in earlier episodes I showed you, which I'll pull up again, that UFC PI case study where they followed a fighter measuring his resting metabolism over the course of his camp and how that extreme dieting led to significant reductions in his resting metabolic rate. So this is what happens when we look at something short term, but let's talk about the long-term implications of it and what that's doing to your body. So there's quite a few studies and there's not any in fighter specifically. So this is kind of looking at weight class sports as a whole. I'm definitely going to pull in studies on, generic population because there is a lot of dieting, low energy studies and the yo-yo dieting. All of that is looked at in obviously overweight or obese individuals because we don't think that athletic individuals, we need to study this, right? Or it's just not really looked at because we don't consider athletic individuals to be overweight or unhealthy. These are fit individuals that have body fat ranges that are in very healthy percent ranges, but they are reducing their body mass in very short time periods and they're doing this frequently. So again, what are the long-term implications of this? So there's one study that I'm going to pull up for you right here because I really love this. This is also done by quite a few professors and PhDs that I know in ISSN, whom I'm very, very, very big fans of. But one of the biggest things when we talk about happens when you constantly go through these really restrictive periods of eating, it disrupts something called metabolic flexibility. And so this is what I want to explain to you. So metabolic flexibility, I'm going to read this definition for you right here, can be described as the ability of skeletal muscle to maintain energy homeostasis by adjusting the utilization of substrate pathways. The efficiency of metabolic adjustments to available energy substrates is critical during transitions from post-absorptive fasted to absorptive fed states from rest to exercise. So basically what that's saying, metabolic flexibility, right? We have to think about the integrity of all the cells in our body. Everything has a role. Our body is an incredible machine. So when we go through these extremely restrictive eating periods, and now we're coupling that with intense exercise, we're disrupting all of these natural pathways within the cell. They're going to be responsible, like I just said, for our appetite, our stress levels, our digestive system, and our metabolism. And what they've found with long-term yo-yo cycling, and this is again more so seen in individuals, obese or overweight individuals, these types of studies. But what they've found is that disruptions of metabolic pathways over time, right? Because it's not just one time that crash dieting is going to cause significant long-term effects, but this is when you're doing it chronically over time, what is happening inside the body. So they found that disruption of metabolic flexibility, increases risk for abdominal obesity, insulin resistance, cardiovascular disease. And if we kind of go back to a past episode talking with Mike Basil, he had kind of mentioned that some of these greats, right, that they've died later in life, of course, various health complications, but some of the things that he mentioned are, why are some of the greatest athletes of all time, people who've been so fit their entire lives, have diabetes or have heart disease? So that could technically be a consequence of all of this rapid weight loss over and over again, not taking care of your body properly after the fights or not following a proper diet that's balanced in macronutrients, protein, carbs, fats, vitamins, and minerals, so that can increase your risk for developing these issues later in life. And I know a lot of you guys only care about the immediate, but this is why I'm talking about it, because let's talk about the long-term implications. Because why are you going to beat your body up, constantly put yourself through so much stress, restrict so much food, cause all of these problems inside of your body, to only have to deal with so many of these complications that are going to reduce not only lifespan, but quality of life later? There's no point to that, okay? So if we're kind of, again, looking at what happens within the body and the long-term implications of doing these harsh cuts over and over again, of going through periods of overeating afterwards, of not maintaining a healthy diet, a healthy walk-around weight year-round, there is some concern, especially for combat sports. And some research, again, it's coming out, there needs to be more research, absolutely, but we're seeing an identified risk for post-career obesity in weight class sports compared to other athletes in non-weight category sports. Okay, so if you're not doing this constant yo-yo dieting, it's much easier to maintain your weight over a long period of time than if you don't. So also, another thing to note, this was another study I found, I'll put it up here in the corner. When we talk about disruptions to metabolic flexibility, now I don't know if a lot of you guys know, but most of you should know that there is a significant interaction, correlation, relationship between the gut and the brain. Okay, so, and especially, and this is very common if we look at it in obese individuals. So when we compare obese individuals to healthy individuals, obese individuals have a really bad gut microbiome. All of the gut bacteria is like the unhealthy gut bacteria, which essentially does contribute to all the metabolic syndromes, heart disease, diabetes, insulin resistance, things like that. So, and then when you look at healthy individuals, they have a much larger diversity in their gut microbiome. So this one study showed that yo-yo dieting also shows a strong relationship to gut health. And it said that weight gain leads to an unhealthy gut. We've seen that time and time again in these gut microbiome studies when we're comparing obese, unhealthy individuals to leaner, healthier individuals. However, what this paper was essentially implying was that with yo-yo dieting, when you have that weight gain, it increases those bad gut bacteria. Okay, and that bad gut bacteria is responsible for, again, the insulin resistance, improper digestion of nutrients. It's causing more fat retention. So with yo-yo dieting periods, so you lose it really fast and then it comes back really fast. It was basically implying that when you gain the weight, you're adding more bad gut bacteria. And even after rapid weight loss, that unhealthy gut bacteria stays. So just because you lost the weight doesn't mean that you lost all of that bad gut bacteria and put back good gut bacteria. That's not what happened, because that's largely influenced by food. So how you lose the weight also matters, which we'll get into. But that bad gut bacteria stayed even after the weight loss, and that bad gut bacteria created an environment that made the body want to gain back the weight faster. Because that bad gut bacteria stayed in there and made that person, or makes people, more susceptible to gaining weight back. Okay, so again, just to recap, we're talking about the metabolic damages of extreme cutting. So let's review one more time what happens. We're affecting thyroid hormones. Thyroid hormones are going to decrease, which is going to in turn decrease your metabolism. Pulling back that UFC PI study, again, where they followed that fighter, his baseline metabolism reduced by 500 calories, which is insane. The cortisol adrenal axis, we're spiking cortisol up. Cortisol is really great for like that flight or fight response, but when its levels are persisting for long periods of time, it's causing significant inflammation and significant reductions in lean tissue, and it's increasing body fat retention. And last but not least, our hunger hormones. Leptin decreases, ghrelin increases. Ghrelin's going to make you more hungry. So what does that mean while you're dieting? Well, you're going to get to a point where, one, your body's not really going to want to lose anymore, but now your body is starving. So anything that hormone that helps keep you satiated, helps keep you full, is really not going to be there, and that hunger hormone is ramped up. So that's also, again, your body's going to make you want to consume a ton of calories to bring your body weight back to a baseline where it's comfortable. So all of this is going to cause a lot of issues for maintaining such a low weight. But it's also going to trigger the body to be in a state to gain that weight back much more quickly. And again, just reviewing the long-term implications, we're disrupting these natural pathways of the cell. They don't want to exist in these extremes. So later on in life, we are seeing that it increases risk for diabetes, cardiovascular disease. It makes losing weight harder. So for those of you, especially later in your fight careers, that have issues dropping weight, or individuals, maybe you're not in a weight class sport, maybe you've just yo-yo dieted your whole life, but later in life, again, find it harder to lose that body fat, to lose that weight. Well, you might have caused some damage to your cells, so everything's not responding the way it should. All right, so now let's kind of take a step back and talk about what the broader science is kind of telling us when we're looking at where the weight loss is coming from. Is it more fat or is it more muscle? And when we talk about general weight loss studies, and again, like regular, I hate saying regular, but they are regular. Come on. Regular people are not athletes. That's why athletes, are paid a lot of money and are on TV and we idolize them. So when we're talking about obese regular individuals, not every regular individual is obese, but for individuals that are overweight, extremely obese, we look at weight loss studies in these individuals because they'll undergo calorie restriction, how much weight they can lose to be eligible for a weight loss surgery. So we look at what extreme calorie reduction does in these populations, and especially, individuals who use things like GLP-1s, semaglutide, things like that. What we're seeing, because these populations are notorious for that yo-yo dieting. If you guys all remember Biggest Loser, what happened and what we saw, which we'll get into now, is that very rapid weight loss, that the majority of it came from muscle, not body fat. And what happens is when you lose your muscle, that's your energy reservoir, okay? The body functions off of lean tissue. It's your most metabolically active tissue. When you lose more muscle than body fat, again, you're depressing all of those key hormones that we just talked about. So when you go back to eating a normal diet, or more than likely eating more than you should because that hunger hormone is shot up, you're putting back on more body fat, okay? So you've just kind of now made yourself even unhealthier by losing all that weight, which came more from muscle than body fat. And we see the same thing when individuals are sick. When you're sick, let's talk about if you're in the hospital, or even when you're just sick at home. After you have the flu, you're like, oh my God, I lost like 10 pounds, feel great. Well, guess what? Unfortunately, most of that was from muscle, because again, your muscles, what holds all of your nutrients, is the most metabolically active tissue. And even when you're sick, your metabolism slightly increases and you're going to be in a catabolic state. So that loss is coming from muscle, which is what we don't want. Okay, so that's kind of what happens when you guys do this weight cycling. You're putting back, if you've lost a ton of muscle during your camp, if you're not measuring where the weight loss is coming from, fat, which stays, we can't manipulate fat at the last minute. So that's why, not to be crass, I tell my fighters, if you're fat, you're fucked, because I can't manipulate fat last minute. There's nothing I can do with that. Muscle is our water reservoir. That's what's affected by carbs, sodium, even fiber content, your water intake. All of that can be manipulated last minute, but body fat cannot. So when you're wondering why you missed weight by a couple pounds, well, maybe you had a couple extra pounds of body fat you didn't get rid of because your last camp you lost a ton of your muscle, and when you went back to eating regularly, you just put back on more body fat, not more muscle. But again, let's get into a study that kind of looks at this a little bit more closely. Again, it's a review. I love it, but fighters are not exempt from this biology when we're talking about this weight cycling. So I'm just going to read to you some talking points because the study was really great. I'll link it here for you if you want to read it more. But they found that without sufficient protein intake, large calorie deficits induce large losses of lean body mass. Okay, so this is why you hear other dietitians saying that if you're going to put yourself in a calorie restriction, protein intake is crucial. We want to preserve that lean tissue as much as possible. Low energy intake and minimal body fat are perceived as indicators of energy unavailability, resulting in a homeostatic endocrine response aimed at conserving energy and promoting energy intake. So again, if we go back to talking about how hormones are affected and what's going on, this is basically saying that the body doesn't want to be at a super low weight or a super low body fat. So when you put yourself in that state, all of the hormone responses are going to go into more of a conservation mode, meaning you kind of put yourself in this survival mode. So your body's going to do everything it can to force you to want to increase your energy intake, and it's going to promote more fat storage because fat is your infinite energy source. The body wants it. So you're creating an environment where your body's going to want to promote more fat storage, not muscle, right? The hormonal environment created by low adiposity and energy restriction appears to promote weight regain and threaten lean mass retention. Is everything starting to come together about what happens when you guys do these extreme dietings? And last but not least, which I've talked about this a lot in presentations that I've done at ISSN, I talk about with my female clients, there's a lot of studies to show that women are more affected by energy restriction from a metabolic efficiency perspective. Even if I show you this study, I mean, it's not in fighters, it was just a general weight loss study in obese individuals. Basically, they found that with a super restrictive diet, they put these individuals on an 8-week intervention. First phase was the weight loss phase. They consumed 810 calories, 85 grams of protein per day, roughly 83 grams of carbs, and 14 grams of fat. Again, average age was 51 years. Everyone was about 100 kilos, so a little over 200 pounds. The results: men lost significantly more weight than women, which we would always expect because their weight's going to be a little bit higher. They're larger individuals. But when we're talking about changes in body fat compared to muscle, the losses in body fat percentages were fairly similar between groups, but women lost significantly more muscle during that than men. So women, energy restrictions for us, a lot more susceptible to the damage. So again, keep that in mind. But if we're going back to talking about, practical weight loss strategies and technically what happens when we aren't consuming a really high protein diet. And this was something that was talked about at ISSN this year, so I want to bring it up. So there was a study, and I'll throw in the chart for you here of the slide that I took a picture of. The body's ability to exist, like this, if we're talking about the system as a whole, right? The system thrives off of the lean tissue. So the lean tissue, our metabolically active tissue, this is what keeps the host healthy. So if we, again, go through these periods of severe restriction, our body's going to burn through that, right? You're going to be in a catabolic state because your muscles, when we break them down, that's what's going to help release nutrients. That's what's going to help release energy. Again, when we say that we consume protein, protein is more for recovery, but protein is used for everything in the body. It helps make your hormones. It helps make your antibodies. It makes all the little chemical messengers that help with different metabolic systems in your body. It's used for so much stuff. So when you're not consuming enough protein, your body's going to break down that protein to help create other nutrients to keep the system alive. So when we're in these compromised states, it's so important to maintain a high protein intake because that's what the body is going to break down first to keep the host alive. So to recap everything, large energy deficits trigger greater losses in lean body mass than fat mass. Smaller, progressive diets slow better results that help preserve muscle in the metabolism. So this is why you hear me saying, I don't want you dropping 5 pounds per week. 1 to 2 pounds, even 3 pounds is pushing it. We want steady, slow weight loss. That's how we preserve your system, maintain this metabolic flexibility that we're talking about. When we're talking about nutrition, this is why we say you need to have a high protein intake. Your body weight in protein per day if you're doing extreme energy restriction, because even I understand in combat sports when there's a lot of money on the line and you have to make a certain weight. And if we got to drop 40 pounds in a month, I mean, we're going to make it happen. Is it healthy? No. So don't come at me, oh, you're not optimizing the athlete. Guess what? You've put me in a position where I have to prioritize one thing and I can't do both at the same time. So if we do have to undergo periods of severe restriction, higher protein is needed to offset muscle loss as much as possible and preserve the metabolism. So that's going to look at intakes and maybe upwards of 2.5 to 3 grams per kilogram per day. And I'll get into some examples of what I've even done in my personal experience with clients on how we can lose quite a significant amount of weight and still preserve all of those markers. And again, we're talking about implications of this yo-yo dieting. I mean, of course, we've seen it, regular individuals in these rapid weight loss studies, but even athletes, lean individuals who undergo these rapid body composition changes, lose a ton of weight really quickly and restrict themselves. We're even seeing in these population of people that they often experience rapid fat gain and increase weight post-career compared to other athletes that aren't engaged in these weight class sports. And something that's really interesting, and I'm going to read this to you because I feel like this just drives a point home. So post-diet, athletes often experience rapid fat regain. This can lead to post-starvation obesity, where fat is regained faster than muscle and potentially to levels higher than baseline. Does that not sound like what I explain to you guys every time you complain that you're not dropping weight the way that you were able to? And all of you, at least people that I've worked with, always report pigging out after a fight, okay? Last but not least, repeated cycles of crash dieting and regain, i.e. in weight class sports, are linked to long-term increases in body fat. So I hope that was super informative to you because it's so great to explain what's happening when you guys are doing all this craziness to yourself. But how do we break the cycle? What are solutions to this? So solution number one is not undergoing these super harsh cuts. Okay, this is why we say mitigate fat loss or mitigate your weekly rate of weight loss. You shouldn't be losing more than 2 pounds per week. Okay, and we're aiming at targeting fat loss, not muscle loss. Now again, some muscle loss is inevitable, but I even want to show you guys how it can be preventable with the right diet. And again, consuming high protein isn't enough to maintain all the muscle when you're exercising heavily or undergoing periods of severe calorie restriction. We need something to stimulate muscle growth, which is going to come from strength training. So even a lot of studies that just look at individuals undergoing weight loss in different scenarios where we just look at diet, we look at just exercise, then we look at diet and exercise combined. And the best results are always seen with the diet plus exercise groups. So even one study I was reading recently, it was showing, okay, every single group achieved weight loss, but the only group that increased lean mass was the resistance training plus diet group. So resistance training is crucial when you're trying to drop the body fat, okay? But even here are some examples of 2 clients that I've had over the years. So my one client, and he wasn't a professional fighter by any means. So this is going to kind of give you more perspective for a regular individual, but who trains MMA. He was a former football player. He's been athletic his entire life, but he came to me to lose some weight. So you can see here in the chart, in 6 months, again, because we wanted to achieve a slow rate of weight loss. So in total, he lost 44 pounds in 6 months. Of that 44 pounds, 40 pounds came from body fat and only 3.8 pounds came from lean mass. And if you can kind of see the dates that we did these measurements to assess his body fat percentage, his amount of lean mass, he wasn't doing too much strength training in the beginning. And so I wanted to mitigate that lean mass loss. And we told him, or I told him to do weight training at least 3 times a week to preserve that lean tissue. And you can see by the second time around when we tested him again at the end, there were almost like no losses in lean tissue. All right, now let's throw that into the perspective of actually short-term energy restriction, fight camps, short periods, okay? Here's another client that I have. In 6 weeks, he dropped 5 pounds. So, about 1 pound per week, a little bit less, which would be the gradual weight loss that we would want to see. But a lot of us talk about in fight sports, because we are having to do a calorie deficit and the energy expenditure is so high, we always estimate that some lean tissue is going to be lost. We always estimate it for it when we're crunching the numbers on, can this athlete make weight? Where's that weight loss coming from? What's realistic in certain time periods? We always factor in at least 2 pounds of muscle loss over the course of camp. Well, not with this client, which again, he was still resistance training. He was eating his body weight in protein per day or more. I was feeding him a hell of essential amino acids because essential amino acids are a great great way to kind of preserve that lean tissue without the calorie increase. So if we're minimized or we're restricted in how many calories we consume in a day, and again, we want to balance. It can't just all come from protein. We do need some carbs. We do need some fats. Essential amino acids are fantastic for increasing protein intake without the calorie increase. So that's what's going to help feed those tissues. So you can see the first time, 6 weeks, dropped 5 pounds. He had no losses in lean mass. Again, moderate weight decrease, okay, nothing crazy. A couple years later, second time around, 6 weeks, he dropped 7.6 pounds in total, okay? So a little bit more of that weight loss, but no losses in lean mass. Wow, look how incredible that is when you do things the right way. So just to recap that, how we break this cycle, how we protect you, because I'm not gonna tell you, don't cut weight. Combat sports, you're gonna have to, it's inevitable. Any weight class sports, it's a part of the career path. However, there is a smarter way to do this to protect you from the long-term implications down the road, because big weight cuts, no matter what sport or activity you do, are not healthy. And we want to preserve the system, the host, the body as much as possible. We want to mitigate damage such as diabetes and cardiovascular disease and all these things that can happen later in life. I want you to preserve your lean muscle. I don't want you to ruin your hormones and your metabolism. So there is a smart way to do this, and slow and steady is going to win the race. But even if we have to push the slow and steady rate a little bit more, be smart about it, okay? High protein, essential amino acids, and overall, just keep your weight in check year round. So if we're talking about post-fight, what are some strategies to help mitigate that fat regain? Well, first of all, in the beginning of camp, if you're preserving your lean tissue, then you won't be in that state where your body's gonna wanna put it all back. Severe calorie restriction, overtraining, you are going to signal the body to want to consume more calories because those hunger hormones are going to be affected. So give yourself, and I'm not going to be unrealistic. After the fight, give yourself a day or two to go ahead and enjoy yourself. But the rest of the week, don't go overboard. Understand what your calorie needs are at maintenance and build yourself back up to that slowly. So almost like a reverse dieting. So let's say just before fight week, you were eating 1,800 calories. Okay, so after the fight, eat close to 2,200, 2,300, and then increase that by a couple hundred calories every week until you're at baseline. Still consume high protein. Don't go for all the donuts and the pizza and the ice cream. One to 2 days isn't going to kill you. By all means, enjoy yourself, but get back to eating normally. Still train lightly. Again, if you didn't sustain any major injuries while you're increasing your calorie intake. And that's what's going to help prevent all of that fat gain back and just, stay active. Okay. And if you do go a little bit overboard, give yourself more time leading up to a fight to get that weight off, again, to protect the system, not put yourself in such an extreme state that's going to lead to these unhealthy yo-yo dieting practices throughout your whole life. So to bring this all to a close, your body isn't broken, your plan is, and we can fix that. If you're tired of the rebound cycle, it's time to stop. DM me on social media. You can find me at The Fight Nutritionist. Share this with all of your training partners, all of your friends who've undergone this yo-yo dieting their whole life and they're wondering why their body feels broken. Well, guess what? Kind of is. Make sure to like, subscribe, and listen to next week. Appreciate you guys so much. See you soon.